Female-only scholarships. They've been around for decades, but perhaps not for much longer. That's my subject on today's Flamingo File. I'm Janice Flamingo of the University of Ottawa. Most of us probably simply shook our heads in disgust when we read Susanna Walter's Washington Post rant last summer titled "Why Can't We Hate Men?", in which the professor of sociology and gender studies at Northeastern University outlined the reasons she believes it is acceptable to despise half of the human race. She's since clarified, you may be relieved to know, that it's mainly white men that she hates. But one man, Professor Mark Perry of the University of Michigan, did something more concrete and potentially consequential in response to the Walters tirade. He launched a Title IX investigation alleging that Professor Walters had contravened her own university's stated anti-discrimination policy. Title IX, for anyone who doesn't know, is an American statute that outlaws discrimination in education on the basis of sex. Perry asked in an email to Walters' school, quote, "How would it be possible for Walters to publicly state that she hates all men and not discriminate against them any more than a KKK racist who gave herself the right to hate all blacks or gays would not likely discriminate against those groups," end quote. And he followed up by asking, how could a male faculty colleague applying for tenure and or promotion in her department expect fair treatment from Professor Walters? How indeed? Well, at the time when I first learned about Professor Perry's complaint, I honored him for his determination, but I was pessimistic about the possibility of any action being taken against the profusely misandrous Professor Walters. Of course, we know that any tirade against women by a male professor would result in immediate suspension of all academic activities pending a full psychiatric evaluation and extensive counseling for the professor's delusional rage, and rightly so. But we live in a culture in which expressions of anti-male hatred are so normalized that Professor Walters' screed caused no discernible reaction from the leadership at her university, and she's not likely, in my opinion, to be disciplined for her bigotry. But I could be wrong, because what I didn't know at the time was that Professor Perry is something of a veteran in the fight against normalized anti-male discrimination, and he's had significant success. He's been challenging female-only scholarships and initiatives and programs at universities through the university's own Title IX offices for the past 2 years, and he's been winning some significant battles. 2 women-only scholarships offered by the University of Minnesota, his alma mater, were open to men as a result of Professor Perry's challenge, and the University of Michigan-Flint, where he now teaches, opened its Girls in Engineering, Math, and Science camp to boys. He's now filed more than 20 complaints against other schools for programs that discriminate against males. And he's encouraging others to join his campaign, noting that, quote, "There are likely thousands of single-gender female-only scholarships, awards, fellowships, initiatives, programs, summer camps, clubs, etc. that are ripe for Title IX investigation." And other advocates are taking up the cause. Notably, a young man named Kursat Pagotz, a University of Southern California PhD student who has launched some exciting Title IX investigations with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, mainly against a massive volume of female-only scholarships and awards, though he's also prepared various reports of bias against specific offices. The schools that are currently under federal investigation include the University of Southern California, Yale, Princeton, and others. Margaret Valois, a Title IX attorney who specializes in defending accused male students, has filed a similar Title IX complaint against Tulane University and obtained a win very recently. Further complaints are in process against Georgetown University, the University of Michigan, the University of Virginia, the University of Pennsylvania, and others. Now, despite some predictable anti-male backlash on social media, including gossip about Curset's own brush with a false accuser under Title IX, he is undaunted in his quest to make universities live up to their stated commitments to equality. How can a university declare itself opposed to gender discrimination while offering dozens, in some cases hundreds, of scholarships and awards and initiatives that men can't access? If these discriminatory affirmative action measures were ever morally justifiable, which in my opinion they never were, justice required non-discrimination and nothing more. But if they were ever morally justifiable, they certainly aren't now. It's been over 3 decades since women were minorities in most academic faculties and schools. Women now outnumber men at a ratio of 3 to 2, roughly, in all but a very small handful of specialized programs, particularly basically computing science and engineering. Overall, women are the clear majority at post-secondary institutions, accounting for 1,082,000 undergraduate degree recipients in the year 2014-2015, while male numbers are stagnating at 812,000. While feminists demand ever more aggressive measures to shoehorn women into the STEM fields, Professor Mark Perry's own research shows that women now earn the majority of STEM degrees overall, depending on exactly what one counts as STEM. And women are twice as likely as men to be hired into academic STEM positions, at least partly because of incredible feminist pressure. Men's numbers in many specific university fields, especially in education, law, medicine, and the social sciences, are really alarmingly low, and all of these fields are turning against men, promoting myths about male sexual violence and the harm of masculinity, as seen recently in the American Psychological Association's guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men. In addition, as they always have, men work in far more dangerous jobs than women and are far, far more likely to suffer serious injury or death in their work lives. The least that universities could do, one would think, is not add insult to injury by pretending that women are the disadvantaged ones. Unfortunately, cultural sympathy for women is so strong, and at men's expense, that it's very easy for gynocentrists to make the quest for gender equality look like an attack on women, as we see even from the title of a recent article published in December 2018, written for NBC News by Katie Engelhardt, called "Men's Rights Activists Are Attacking Women's Scholarships and Programs." The far less sensational truth is that these scholarships will still be available for women, but men will have a shot at them too. Yes, equality does look like disadvantage when you've been given unfair perks your whole life. For this article, Engelhardt interviewed a number of feminist activists, all of whom attempt to justify the blatant discrimination. As one would expect, they don't make moral or philosophical arguments, and they show themselves incapable of honest reflection on feminist overreach. Instead, they fudge the truth and rely heavily on tired claims about the special barriers that women have faced in history and supposedly continue to face. But it's worth looking at their arguments to assess the strength of the feminist case against justice. One such activist is Adaku Onyeka Crawford, who is the senior counsel for the National Women's Law Center. She defended affirmative action for women in that article simply by saying that if we take it away, we may see women's gains falter. Well, yes, it is possible that if women are being promoted simply because they're female, their numbers may decrease when female advantage is removed. That's why it's called equality of opportunity. but one suspects that Ms. Onyeka Crawford is not at all interested in this kind of equality. She revealed her near-phobic aversion to reality by calling women-only programs, quote, gender inclusive. Other feminist activists interviewed for the article argued in hair-splitting fashion that Title IX is meant to redress historical sex discrimination, not just underrepresentation, with the implication that women's underrepresentation in the past was a special kind of injustice for which overcorrection in the present is perfectly justifiable. Jocelyn Samuels, a former director of the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health, is quoted in the article as saying that, yes, men may be underrepresented in some academic fields. And she singles out nursing as the one example that she'll admit to. But she claims this is, quote, not because of the same institutional discrimination that barred women from certain disciplines, end quote. Her statement implies that men's underrepresentation is the result of choice or some other neutral factor, while women's underrepresentation was and is the result of something far more malignant, something called institutional discrimination. But this is nonsense. There is no evidence that women have ever in the last century been kept out of academic fields through institutional exclusion. Women who wish to pursue a university education have been legally able to do so since the late 19th and early 20th centuries. No law or policy or institutional practice prevented it. Many chose not to because they didn't wish to go to college, weren't expected to go to college, weren't encouraged to do so, and because marriage and childbearing prevented them from doing so. If these are institutional barriers, they're certainly no more tangible or deliberate than the barriers that are now preventing many men from choosing to attend or achieve success in post-secondary education, most particularly the overt anti-male bias that has become the orthodoxy in many fields. And it is disingenuous, to say the least, to pretend that only women can face significant barriers. Another feminist activist quoted in the article takes a different tack to say that it doesn't matter if women outnumber men in the vast majority of academic disciplines. Her argument is that until women achieve complete equality of outcome in the outside world, they will still deserve the special academic perks they've had for the past half-decade. Professor of Sociology Susanna Walters, yes, it's the same one, is dexterous with a few convenient statistics. She mentions that female managers earn 77% of male managers' salaries. And she mentions that women make up just 30% of university presidents and 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs. So according to Walters, until absolute equality of outcome is achieved in every metric that feminists care to measure, of course, not the number of women in sewer repair or strip mining or frontline soldiering, and even in the absence of any evidence that women are being prevented from equaling men's achievement by anything but their own refusal to make the personal sacrifices necessary to do so. Until that feminist utopia is achieved, men should still be discriminated against, according to Walters, even in areas of academic study where women have an enormous, actually embarrassing advantage in numbers. It's obvious that Walters doesn't give a damn about men's academic underachievement. On the contrary, one suspects that men's numbers could drop to zero, and she'd see no reason to discontinue female-only programs. In fact, then she'd have a different argument for why they could continue. Even if she weren't on record as an unrepentant man-hater, it would be hard to take her tripe seriously. And this is all that the feminist can marshal at the moment. These Title IX challenges are unprecedented, and I suspect they have caught feminists by surprise. We can expect to see them rally in 2019 to defend all of the special privileges that they've had in place for nearly 50 years. But if men's advocates keep up the attack, launching more challenges and creating strong legal precedents, it may be too late for the feminists. And either way, things in this particular area look bad for them, even if they win. Their defense of such blatant discrimination reveals them for the bigoted female chauvinists we know they are. Normally, I'm the last person to be confident, but in this case, I'd say that both principle and strategy are on the side of long overdue justice for men.